And me, she's not a kid anymore.
Oh.
They grew up so fast.
They did go up fast. We got a new dog
Jonathan
that was
and
abandoned
Jessica, can you hear
Whitewater
us?
Park. With
Oh,
a kitten.
hometown
So
hero.
yeah, it was a puppy and a kitten that were
You didn't
abandoned.
take the kitten?
Well, so the person that found the animals took the kitten,
Okay.
and then we took the dog and failed at fostering it. So
Oh, cool.
yeah.
What breed is it?
we just got its DNA back today. It is
Oh,
a treeing, what is it? A treeing coon hound dog.
oh,
wow.
hey, I think it's beautiful.
Beautiful animal.
Probably has like a decent amount of energy.
Yeah, I mean, we're at the dog park
Okay.
twice a day.
Well, that's great. Congratulations on your new addition.
Yeah, that's fun.
It's more work than kids.
Oh my gosh, absolutely.
But
Almost as
less
expensive.
college
Yeah.
tuition. Probably.
Minus cost.
My issue is that instead of saving for children, I'm just like, I'm gonna take the money I would be spending on a kid, spend it on myself.
There you go.
That is a, you know, one way to do it.
I mean, that's sort of a joke, but also kind of not.
Maybe more true than you want it to be.
Oh, Commissioner Stegman.
There we are. There's the internet.
For, I don't remember, did
Hey.
everyone know there's dinner in the back room? You got dinner, Sean? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Make you a to-go. Could staple 2 plates together. Make you a to-go cake.
Yeah, it's just,
See,
I can't.
we got 2 online.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're good. Think we're ready?
Ready?
How you
Ready.
doing? You ready?
Yeah.
You ready? Okay.
You're not.
Mic's on. We'd like to welcome everyone, including some guests here today to the May 1, 2024 work session for the Cottonwood Heights City Planning Commission. And just in reviewing the business agenda, we will be taking some public comments and reviewing some minutes from February 7th, but I think it should be a very quick meeting. So the primary work today, we're just going to hear from staff and find out what they've been up to in addition to traveling to national meetings and state meetings and teach us and update us.
Yeah, it's been a pretty busy spring. While Mike's pulling up his stuff, I will share. I remember taking this job, and I came from working out west in Harriman, where everything was very busy and lots of development. And I remember thinking, like, oh, surely won't be crazy in a city that's pretty built out. And it continues to be very busy and very stimulating and a lot of fun. So Mike's going to share just kind of a presentation, catching you guys up on some projects. No like big announcements or anything, just kind of a status update. And then, yeah, the business session will be very minimal tonight. So there's dinner in the back room, Commissioner Bolton. It's just in a different room tonight if you want to grab some. Let me take you back.
Good.
All right. Yeah, so we only have minutes on the agenda. We, by ordinance, have to hold a planning commission meeting once a month. So because we all need to be here to approve minutes, I figured we'll just give you an update on some of the bigger projects. This is not all of them. If you have questions on other things going on or things you're hearing, feel free to interrupt and ask. And, you know, I don't have an hour worth of content here. So let me know and stop me when you have questions. But just some general updates. The first is an update on the Dover Hill Drive subdivision and park. Both phases of the subdivision have now been approved. Subdivision plats have been recorded for both the western, I think 4 lots, and then the eastern, I think it's 9 lots. As a reminder, the trigger for park development was when phase 1 started, which was like late 2023. So the 2-year timer for the park being finished and completed and open started several months ago. So we've seen there's homes being constructed on the western side, and we're starting to see permit applications come in. I think maybe even just today for lots on the eastern side of the park. So you'll see that is a full-on construction site now. Development is underway on all of that.
Everything going well with the communication with the adjacent neighbors?
I think we've been responsive to questions. You know, there have been several public records requests and providing plans and you know, updated approvals and making sure that you know, people are aware of those things. So
Great, thank you.
Another one, the northern gravel pit property, it's known as Wasatch Rock. It's that northern 20-acre piece of the gravel pit. It received its entitlement approval back in, I don't know, 2021 or something like that, quite a few years ago. Since then, they've been working on various things, but most recently, the hillside reclamation engineering of that graded out hillside that you can kind of see kind of in that area there. They have to restore that hillside and stabilize it and put in some major retaining structures and really complicated engineering. They've had 3 different engineering firms kind of working on it, making sure all their calculations match up. They've also had to work with the Metropolitan Water District of Salt Lake and Sandy because the large aqueduct pipeline runs through this property. It's right where the proposed roadway through the property is going to go, so the road crosses over it. So to do that through that easement, there needed to be an agreement between Rockworth, who's the developer, Metro Water, and then the city will be a party to that agreement as well. And that agreement should be signed or approved by the council and then probably this month sometime. So we will see work begin on the site grading and reclamation probably in mid to late May. So we'll see equipment out there. Along the way, that will include demolition of the old abandoned buildings that are on the site, which will be nice to get those out of there and cleaned up. And then they'll be working on that site grading and hillside reclamation for quite a while before I think we see them move down to the roadway, to the storm drain infrastructure, and then eventually buildings. So this is kind of the first step in the actual construction of this site that I think we'll see under construction for several years at least.
Commissioner Chapel's got her hand up.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. So I have in my other volunteer role, I work with the Seismic Safety Commission, and one of the initiatives that we've been talking about with Envision Utah are these aqueducts. And I believe this section of the aqueduct does cross the fault like 4 times or old fault scarps. And I know there are you imagine in a major earthquake having this aqueduct severed or damaged, that's pretty inconvenient for a lot of Utah residents that they are showering with bottled water and things like that. So it's one of those discussions where our community's ability to recover after a large earthquake is very dependent upon these aqueducts. And I was just curious if there has been a discussion about what the water district plans, or if there are plans for this section of the aqueduct.
Actually, yes, I don't have that as a slide on here, but this summer, I don't think it's through this property, but it is through much of the city. They are replacing or constructing a new water pipeline that will come from up in this area all the way down to their facility down at the southern end of the city. They are crossing numerous fault hazards and slope stability hazards. Obviously, there's not a lot of wiggle room with where that pipeline needs to run to avoid those hazards. So they submitted, and they've been working with our Public Works and Engineering Department, really technical, thousands of pages of engineering documents for how they're going to design that pipe, acknowledging that their existing pipes are pretty old. So they're starting to replace that pipeline along this whole alignment beginning this summer. They received a handful of zoning variances to be able to cross those hazard areas. So they are working on that now. I'm happy to talk with you, Commissioner Chapel, in more detail, maybe offline, about how they've engineered that. And I can get you in contact with our city engineer who will be able to explain that better than I can. But that's kind of the answer, is they are embarking on this multi-phase process of reconstructing these old water infrastructure lines.
Okay, that's great news. Thank you. I'd love to have that conversation.
Sure, yeah.
And just a FYI, they're running it right down Fort Union Boulevard, across Wasatch Boulevard, cutting across Nut Tree, interfacing with the Memorial Estates, and then next to Danish to kind of head due south.
There's
And
actually
it exists.
a very helpful newsletter article by Councilmember Highland in
Yes.
the newsletter that just was published today. So for anybody here who wants to read more, that gave like a helpful outline of kind of where the projected path will go, as well as some other infrastructure updates. So
Great.
look forward to your newsletters.
I want to touch on the old mill property. We don't have any plans or anything tonight. I think there's word out in the community that something's coming here. The owner of the old mill is interested in applying when they redevelop this property, using the Plan Development District Ordinance tool to make that application. In order to even apply for development using that ordinance, there are certain prerequisite requirements that that need to be followed. One is holding a work session discussion with the Planning Commission at a very conceptual level, to show just again, at a draft concept level, the general direction they're thinking of taking that development. It's also recommended or an option that they do that with the city council. Once they do those work session discussions, they're then required to hold, separate from the city, neighborhood meetings, at least 2 of them, to get public input. And then there may be some other requirements in there, but then they're allowed to actually make an application, at which point we begin the technical review, bring that back to the commission for formal public hearing and input. They are working towards and had previously requested actually for tonight's meeting to be on the work session agenda to make that preliminary presentation. We asked them to submit plans in enough advance to be able to distribute those, and we didn't receive plans. We still haven't received plans, so that may be an item that returns sometime in June or sometime after. But I think we're getting close to seeing at least a concept, mock-up or scheme of what the property owner intends to do with this property. That would then lead into a long actual application public engagement process.
I think a good thing to keep in mind when that one comes in, and I'll probably say it again when it does, is that it is gonna be a little different in that they won't have actually made an application yet. So typically when we're bringing something to you in work session, a formal application has been made, which means there's some assurance that certain documents are provided at a reasonable level of detail. This is going to be more conceptual before they even apply. So I think it'll just be good to keep that perspective in mind as you see it, that it is before anything formal, and as such will probably be less granular. So it'll be, I think, really exciting to see what they present and see how the community feedback shapes it.
I would also anticipate we see a similar discussion happening for the larger old gravel pit property sometime in the near future as well. Just an update on a few city projects. This is a work session, so we're not taking public comments in here. Fort Union Boulevard, we've got a bike lane and a sidewalk project. We've talked about this before. It's starting to come together now. We're taking contracts for construction to council, I think next week. This is a project that completes a full continuous sidewalk from Fort Union all the way up 1700 East to 7200 South. That's it's a key school walking route, and I think there's a little bit of sidewalk, but it's not consistent. So that'll be nice to have that completed. And then along Fort Union between that new residential project across from Mount B Park. It's not really that new anymore, I guess. And then Brook Hill Drive, which is the other residential project that the commission kind of considered both at the same time. That's a project to construct a grade separated, so separated from the curb and then the park strip, bike path, and then a wider sidewalk along there. And those improvements are in place at those 2 development projects, but we had grant funding to complete the space in between those. So all of this is being bid out as one project, and we're hoping to kick off in May or June. Still working on, the technical side of things and making sure all the property owners are on board with it, but that's headed that direction.
I'm really grateful to staff for connecting those dots. I mean, we were concerned at the time that we were creating 2 islands where we were gonna ask the developer to adhere to the Fort Union master plan. But it was kind of like this, sidewalk and bike lane to nowhere. It was just these 2 segments that were just kind of isolated, and we were just kind of like a model home where it's like, this is what we'd love to see all the way up and down here, but who's to say whether or not that will happen or not. So however that happened behind the scenes, thanks for connecting dots, even for a small section.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, get your bikes out, ride the block.
that's right, back and forth.
I will
and
say
do
too,
laps.
kind of like on a similar note, it was very helpful on the staff end that those projects had put that in, because we were actually able to use that toward our grant application, the fact that that was out there. So I think in as much as it's like connecting the dots helps those segments function, those segments being required to be put in, although they seem kind of pointless at the time, makes it significantly easier to get grant funding to connect. So I think it's encouraging, even if it happens very incrementally. Did you have a question, Commissioner Shelton?
I was just gonna ask before you leave.
Oh, yeah.
Developments, any update on Canyon Center?
Oh, that's a great question.
Sure, yeah, good question. I don't have a slide here, but they have approached the city and the city's redevelopment agency a few times on modifying their development agreement with the city. Right now, there's two unbuilt buildings there. One is an apartment building that's on Racket Club Drive. And then one is an office building that's supposed to be on the southern end of that parking structure. And you can see there's an empty space there. That's where an office building was approved. I think that was phase one of this project originally back in like 2013, and it's still not built. Obviously, the office market changed in subsequent years, and they're having a difficult time selling that or finding offers for that. So they are intending to come back and make a request to change the office building into a residential development or residential building, same massing, same height, but it would be condominiums, for sale condominiums, and then some limited commercial on the lower floors of that building. Right now, the city's redevelopment agency said, okay, put together a request, a formal amendment request, and then we'll consider it. That includes financial projections because this project is part of a community development area and is impacting tax increment financing. So changing the building has impacts on the projected revenue generated from the tax increment. So they need to make a formal request of the redevelopment agency, and then we'll need to renegotiate that with all the taxing entities that invested in that project when it was an office. So we are waiting right now for that application, that formal request to come in.
I believe one of the things we've asked for clarification on too is traffic differences. Is that
Yes,
accurate?
so part of that is, and this is where this ties in, is they'll need to amend their conditional use approval from office down to condominium, commercial, whatever their mix of uses that they're proposing. So not only do they need to amend their development agreement with the redevelopment agency, with the city council, they need to come through and amend their conditional use permit with the planning commission, which will include updated traffic impact analysis and, the typical things we look for conditional use permits.
Given that residential has an exemption,
Mm-hmm.
will it be difficult for them to get to the same value?
Well, so they did a preliminary assessment and we were comparing numbers from, 2017 or whenever the trigger date was, it was several years ago, of office in that year with condominium residential in current year, even factoring in the residential exemption, which just means, for property taxes, you take, your taxes are assessed at I think 45% of the value of what your property is actually worth if you're a resident. So 55%, yeah, okay. So you don't pay as much property tax if it's a residential use. If it's a primary residential use, you're paying taxes as if the value of your home was actually only 55% of what it actually is. It's a consistent across Utah, but to Commissioner Shelton's point, that does impact the tax generation for the entire project. So long story short, the increment projections are still comparable to what they were with the office, mainly based on the rise in property values. But if you were to build an office in today's market that was fully financed and successful, that would certainly generate more. But we're kind of comparing, there's no building there now. There's not a good horizon for anticipating an office building there now. So, one of the things the agency will need to consider is it better to have a project we know will move forward in the near future rather than, the speculative project on this office which may not move forward in the near future. So.
Maybe you could also give an update on the park aspect of Canyon Center. We get asked that so often, and that's kind of like a more forward-facing piece.
Yeah, I'll touch on the residential project quick. It's not impacted by this request for a development agreement amendment. other than in the current development agreement, there are construction deadlines. That technically both of those buildings need to be built by December of this year. Obviously, that's not going to happen, so they'll need to apply for an extension to that. In exchange, the developer has stated, he hasn't proposed this in a formal application yet, but has stated they're willing to deed over a portion of the city park project that's supposed to be in the middle of this site. So the city can get to work on that beforehand, and some other financial concessions that I won't get into here, but involve payouts of tax increment and things like that. Given that we are close to signing a contract with a landscape design group that will start the master plan process for that 1 acre park in the middle. The construction of that park is going to be funded by the accumulation of tax increment revenue over time. The budget's not there yet to build the whole park, but there is enough budget to start the design. So we have a preferred contractor, and we're taking that to the council, I think, in mid-May, and we'll start the planning process for that. So the commission will see this again in the fact that they need to apply for an conditional use permit amendment. I don't know at what point in the process they're going to come to the commission. Seems to me like they're going to start with the council first, and they need to talk with the taxing entities because that takes a while. And in part of that process, they'll need to come through the commission.
It's exciting. Green space is always good.
Yeah. Form-based code, we will see this again next month, but we held a public open house in late March. We specifically targeted the property owners that are affected by this potential form-based code, but it was open to all the public. And I think we had a good turnout and had some great conversations with people of educating on what form-based code is and what it does and what it isn't. So we are finalizing a draft ordinance and are tentatively planning to start the public hearing process with the commission in June at our next meeting.
Are there any pivots that you guys have made that at a high level that you can share based on either feedback from us or feedback from the community?
No high level, like broad pivots. There is a master spreadsheet I've been keeping of about 200 very minor ones.
Yeah.
That gets to the granular level of like word choice. So we've been working with our consultant to like finally be tweaking. You know, we've talked so much about the concepts of a form-based code and the benefits of it, and now it's time to actually like bring a draft fully. So we're kind of at that granular level. I think the good news is we've over the last 2 years done so many work sessions on it that we have really built the high level stuff in, and now it's more of just the like proofreading. So as a reminder, it has not ever come, it has been all like work session kind of brainstorming. So this is the first time it's coming for actual public hearing. We've had the public open house for it. We have our project webpage. We have continued to receive like genuinely very helpful feedback about it, but this is the first time it's coming for public hearing. So I do think that some of the feedback brought up in the open house was very helpful and illustrative just to get questions about it from the property owner standpoint. And we were able to like make some tweaks in the code to address those concerns. So I think it was a really productive use of time. And as much as you want to take a project and have everybody just say like, we love it, no changes, it's very helpful to have questions that are brought up. So.
Did you guys find anything with your association meetings, either statewide or nationally, that kind of informed you on just kind of best practices in terms of form-based code, either validating where we're headed or pivots that way?
Certainly, yeah, we have had a handful of different opportunities over the spring to collaborate with planners across the country, and we continue to see form-based code used as a strategy by cities of all shapes and sizes, of all backgrounds, as just like a very strong practice in planning a town center, in getting more of like a high quality commercial environment and getting more of like a community identity in the built environment rather than kind of an unpredictable whatever the developer feels like. So it continues to be, I think, validating of the city council's direction to send us down this path. And it's really fun to travel and see some of the final products that have come out of it and just, yeah, be hopeful that it is as successful here. So
But we're looking forward to you sharing as much as you feel like you'd like to share with us as we kind of go through the process and next steps. So
Yeah,
thank you.
just being in different places and you're in a place, like this, there's a lot of people milling about. And, it feels, there's a lot of energy there and it feels welcoming and a lot of I don't know if all of those places were developed with form-based code, but a lot of their built environment is what, we're trying to replicate through this form-based code. So it's good to see. East Jordan Canal feasibility study. This has been going a little while now as well. We held an open house for this in February of this year. We continue to coordinate with regional partners that are key to see this East Jordan Canal extended. As a reminder, this study is looking at the feasibility, the challenges, the benefits, things we need to be aware of extending the existing East Jordan Canal Trail, which is shown in this picture, all the way across the back of Mount View Park and potentially, looking at ways, once it's back there, where to go with it. From across the freeway to east towards Highland to southwest to the target commercial area. So this feasibility study looks at all of that, not only what does it take to do the trail itself, but then, okay, if we get that, then where do we take this and how does this tie into other regional trail efforts? The trail canal or the canal itself is owned by Salt Lake City Public Utilities, so they're a key partner. Obviously UDOT comes into play as you approach the freeway, so we've been working with those partners. At the open house, we heard quite a bit of general support for a dedicated canal trail, people saying, hey, I used to use that. Why'd you put a fence up along the open canal? And, we didn't, it was the utility that did that, but a lot of interest in having that dedicated trail back there. So we'll continue to refine this feasibility study and happy to share that with the commission when it's done. We'll report on this to the city council. This does not necessarily lead right away into implementation. This was just feasibility. So we know if the decision is made to move forward and try to make this happen, we have a good idea of what it will take and what we're up against and cost implications and benefits and things like that.
The timing is kind of fortuitous in that Holiday has been working on a nearby effort. So Holiday had conducted a similar study for trail feasibility along the north side of I-215. So just right across the interstate from us. And they concluded that study and it actually ranked very high for potential funding at a state level with UDOT's kind of recently created trail fund. So I don't know if that means they're going to be moving forward or if that just means they have greater potential in coming years to turn it into something, but it sort of gets the ball rolling on us maybe connecting into that. And with each project that's done, it becomes a little more feasible to try to tie in. So if you were curious about that, we have factored that into the feasibility study in saying, hey, it might be smart to try to tie into what they're doing. And I will just note, it was really interesting at that open house to hear from the attendees that pretty broadly, they did not want the trail to come through the neighborhood. So one of the alternatives we presented was, okay, if we don't do a trail along where the canal actually goes, would you want us to jog it up through the neighborhood and build sidewalk where it doesn't exist? And it was really interesting to me to hear that, at least from those there, that was not really a desire. So like Mike mentioned, there was much more support for, if you do a trail, do it actually along the canal. And yeah, that was interesting. There's pros and cons to doing it either way, but that was really what we heard there.
There's history of doing, these accesses. I was in DC 3 weeks ago on a trail that originated right in DC proper, 45 miles one way. And it was all through utility easements, transportation corridors. And so it was very evident. I was hyper aware of whose property are we on and where did we go?
Yeah.
Not once did we go through neighborhoods, but they were able to find a way through rail easements and transportation easements and canal trails. And it was fantastic. And just everyone from moms pushing strollers and people walking their dogs to cyclists and just people out for a stroll and the range of people. But somebody at some point had been visionary getting all the right people at the table. So I love that you're interacting with Holiday and with UDOT, and that doesn't surprise me. 45 miles and not through one neighborhood. like
Yeah.
not on one sidewalk that whole time, so. And I know we've got those little fingerlings of properties or that we've got those kind of easements, so. Keep going.
Yeah, I see these commonly on old abandoned like freight rail corridors. Probably fortunately, but in this case, unfortunately, we don't have any of those abandoned corridors in Cottonwood Heights, so we're doing our best. Town center, this is very brief, but I don't have a ton yet, but back in February, the Town Center Advisory Committee presented a handful of different concept ideas to city staff and to the project consulting team on different concepts to be generated. Some very rough, renderings were generated based on those concepts, and now those are being refined. So we're preparing to take 2 to 3 refined concepts with some economic basis behind them back to a town center advisory committee meeting, probably in the next month and a half. And I think at that point, then we'll have these concepts out for public review and be able to really start getting input and refining those down into, hopefully a preferred master plan. This is the part of the project where you just have to kind of, it takes a while to refine these down to a point where we can take them back out and get public input. Once we get back to that point, though, I think you'll see a lot of momentum carrying us through to having a preferred master plan and then moving into the next phase of this.
And if we've slowed things at all, just on behalf of the Town Center Advisory Committee, we pump the brakes to ask staff for more back and forth. And to their credit, they and the contractors facilitated that in a really healthy dialogue. So we don't know what the work product will be, but there's been lots and lots and lots of input, so.
The last one I have to present on, and we can open it up to questions. We have been tasked by the city council in pursuing a Healthy Communities Coalition. Sam is managing this process for our department. But we are partnering with Salt Lake County Health Department. They help set these up. A bunch of cities in the area have health coalitions. And basically it's a public health initiative that it's something kind of unique that we haven't had as a city, formally in the past. So ours is being branded Health in the Heights. If you love that name, all credit goes to Sam. If you don't love it, it's on me because I approved it.
It's great.
The focus is on community health, wellness, and safety through collaboration with various stakeholders, not just city officials, definitely public safety, police, fire, city staff, but also business owners and nonprofit representatives and religious leaders and other members of the community that are out there and kind of can see firsthand what some of the health issues, concerns, opportunities, gaps in Cottonwood Heights is. What's unique about this is a lot of jargony kind of buzzwords, but it's based on actual data. So whatever our Healthy Community Coalition focuses on will be based on issues specific and unique to Cottonwood Heights. It's what Holiday's dealing with versus us versus Sandy versus, Kearns has one. Every community is different in that regard. This will lead into monthly meetings with various coalition members focusing on various topics and hopefully leading to public education campaigns, different policies, potentially resources available for whatever we identify as being important to community health in Cottonwood Heights. So this is just starting. We don't have much more than this right now, but really excited to kind of get this going.
Applied for a big pot of funding, so we'll hear back. It's a pretty competitive process, but I am hopeful that we have a strong application. The funding would be used to help do things like lecture series for the community, different trainings, community events, public information handouts, things like that. The directive of the work is very, very broad. So some of the things that the coalition can focus on are addiction prevention, aging resources, food access, support for new parents, mental health resources. It's very, very broad. So I'm very interested to dig into the data and find out what some of the risk factors are here in Cottonwood Heights. I think with many factors of public health, they're not very public. They're kind of hidden, and we don't always know what's going on in the lives of our community members, especially if there are factors of addiction and any sort of like maybe shame that comes with that. So it'll be really interesting to find out what some of our risk factors are here. And on kind of like a more bright and happy note, it's just really fun work to work with community health and all the things that can come with that. So we'll keep you posted, but it's exciting.
Okay, those were the ones we summarized. What other questions are there on ongoing city projects? Public Works Building is now open,
That's
so
exciting.
that one's complete.
It's a great.
I think there's a grand opening
May
later
13th.
this, okay, in a
May
couple of
13th,
weeks.
there will be a ribbon cutting and a tour. So it's nice and shiny and
Take the snow plows out.
yeah, you can drive a plow, just kidding. Yeah, they won't even let me do that.
How about the Deaf Smith open house?
Sure, oh, okay, yeah,
Everybody was
two
aware.
town hall meetings to maybe one report on and one to just put on your radar. The trail access open house, that's how the city branded it, was just general trail access. I think a lot of the comments were focused on Deaf Smith. But, you know, that was an opportunity to hear from the public on, you know, how important it is to the public to have established public trail access up in the foothills. We heard a lot of comments on the subdivision lot consolidation. Some confusion over that, and it's all kind of technical, but some thinking it was blocking off access, and, you know, there's a lot of information out there. So just speaking generally, I think what we heard is public trail access is very important to residents of the city. The property rights ombudsman was in attendance at the meeting. Who's a state, legal professional to provide just, legal education on the issues of prescriptive roads and prescriptive trails and what it takes to establish those. So there was some good information presented there. And then we just spent most of that 2-hour meeting hearing from various residents. What I think that will lead to is further discussion with the city council and direction on where to take this issue. That being said, it's very clear and established through master plans and public meetings that public trail access and establishing that and formalizing that is a key priority to the city. It has been for a lot of years. So I think the questions left to answer are how we go about doing that, not is it important to the city. And then next, I believe Wednesday, is it next Wednesday? Okay. There is another town hall meeting, a District 2 town hall meeting focusing on annexation. There's several areas south of Creek Road that are kind of unincorporated islands between Cottonwood Heights and Sandy. So that town hall meeting will be all about annexation and, you know, what the impact would be and what the changes would be if those areas were to annex into Cottonwood Heights.
Are you guys being asked about those areas just from a staff standpoint? Are there flag lots? Are there challenges with those pieces?
We get several questions. I think the council has heard a lot more on that than staff has, but we've seen questions. We get a lot of calls still on Tabachi and, you know, permit questions and stuff, and, you know, send them on to the county. And there's always a few properties down in one of those unincorporated areas where part of it's in Cottonwood Heights, part of it's in unincorporated, and they're trying to do stuff with the property and it makes it complicated. So yeah, so that's next week.
Maybe I'll just pull up really quick. I just wanted to show, as we're talking about all these dates, I wanted to just show where community members and also members of the commission can find the newsletter on our website. Because it's a really good resource. So if you guys don't mind, I'm just going to share that. So let's see. So this is the website. Underneath, I find the easiest way to do it is just underneath community. Sorry, my mouse is a little delayed in tracking. And then down here under connect, you just click on city newsletter. And it has the newest one up top and then past issues archived. But if you come into May's and then on, I think it's page 2, the dates we've just been talking about are visible right up here. So the Public Works open house is on the 13th, and then that District 2 town hall meeting is on May 8th. So just kind of a plug to refer back to that if you are ever interested in what's going on. And then while I'm here also, I will mention, we are doing an event with Holiday that's kind of a celebration of the wayfinding signage we did on the Big Cottonwood Trail. So this will be on May 15th, just from 6 to 7. It's super short. It's going to be at Knudsen Park, which is in Holiday, but it's like the terminus of the Big Cottonwood Trail. So we're doing it there. It'll just be a fun opportunity to kind of encourage people to come out, check out the signage. We'll have some activities for kids. And people can walk the trail if they want. So put that on your calendars if you're around, and cross your
Love that.
fingers for good weather.
Thanks for all those updates. I have one question
Please.
for clarification. So I administrative hearing emails, I get the notification of. And there's been some about conditional use
Yeah.
permits.
Mhm.
Remind me when it's the planning commission gets involved in those
Sure.
and when, and then there's also one that just came through about an addition to a home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cover that one if you
Okay.
want to do that.
So I just wanted to understand when we're involved in those
Yeah.
and when not.
So years ago, there were certain conditional use applications that were deemed minor. I don't know if minor is the right word, but less impactful. Still requiring a public process, but the council at the time felt that these could be delegated from the planning commission down to what we call an administrative hearing officer, which is actually just me acting in a different capacity. What we see go through those administrative hearings is pretty limited in scope. It's applications for expansion of a fence or a wall above the normal allowed height. Requires a conditional use, requires a public hearing, but it states in the code that that goes through the administrative hearing process. And then home applications or home businesses with clients. So anytime there's a home business, if you're just using your home as a home office, we have you get a business license, but you don't, it's free. You don't have to go through any approval process. You just have to get the license and then you can operate your home office. But there are certain businesses, the one today was a home Pilates studio. Where a resident was applying to have, a handful of clients per day use a portion of the house for, private Pilates lessons. Because there are clients coming to the home, then that has a potential to have a different impact to the neighborhood and requires a conditional use process or a conditional use permit. The code also designates that those go to the administrative hearing. Those are really, and then short-term rentals. Short-term rentals in the city are so restricted in where they're allowed. All the applications we get essentially are in, 2 or 3 different developments in the city that are already full of approved conditional use permits for short-term rentals. So because of that, the conditional use process for short-term rentals also goes through that administrative hearing process.
I'll say the one exception to the home businesses is if it's a daycare or preschool. So if it's a daycare or a preschool of a certain size, the language is pretty technical. Then it comes to the planning commission. So that's a lot of the members on this commission will probably recall we had one maybe about a year ago last spring. It was a home business, but because it was a daycare or preschool, it came. So that's kind of the one caveat. And then I think we also proposed the same thing potentially for like dog kennels, and that's still kind of potential.
Yeah.
But did you have anything else? to add
No,
on
that's
that,
it.
Grace?
So
Okay.
basically minor conditional use permits go through that administrative hearing
So
process.
the one, I don't remember the exact, the one where they're doing an addition to their home and
That one
illegal.
I'll cover.
Mhm.
So, if you have a structure that's considered a legal non-conforming structure, which honestly, a lot of structures in Cottonwood Heights are because they predate the city incorporating. You have certain rights to maintain that, to keep it, to have it in perpetuity. But if you go to expand it through like an addition in such a way that makes it more non-conforming, there's a process. So to break that down, the scenario that it usually is somebody's home doesn't meet the setback standards because it was built prior to 2005. Totally fine, makes all the sense in the world. They want to add on to it to reinvest in the home. And that addition makes it more non-conforming. It's coming closer to property lines, getting taller, something. The code requires us to take those to the appeals hearing officer. This is the same individual who hears variance applications, but the expansion of non-conforming structures is more frequent than a variance. So really what the hearing process is there, and it's actually not a hearing, it's a public meeting. So that's an important distinction. There's not public comment at it. Is the appeals hearing officer, who's a third-party contracted lawyer, not the city's attorney, but a different lawyer we contract with, assesses the application and is kind of trying to determine, by adding on to this non-conforming structure, is there an undue negative impact to neighbors that is different than that of any construction project? Is it in line with the spirit of the zoning ordinance? That sort of assessment. So that's what the one you got a notification for most recently was. Somebody has a non-conforming deck. They want to relocate it and reconstruct it, and they have to go through this process. So you can definitely go back and forth on whether it's like right to require that process or not. For reinvestment, there's arguments to be made on either side, but it is par for the course for cities to have. that process.
Thanks for all of. I just.
Yeah, there's a lot of.
Great news is you can find us at all of these meetings. So we are there.
Anticipating that we're gonna hit PDD pretty hard, it sounds like on both sides of Wasatch Boulevard with the Walker property. We have a couple members of the commission have not been through that process and what those guardrails are. Can you give everybody kind of a feel for how we've used that vehicle in the past and
Sure.
what they should anticipate a little bit?
Yeah, so the Plan Development District was an ordinance, a zoning tool that was established, I think, in like 2016 or 2017. It targets specific areas of the city, mainly areas that we've identified or had identified at the time as, areas that could likely be redeveloped in the short-term future. Most of that is the large intersection nodes along Fort Union Boulevard. So the 1300 East kind of area there, Highland Drive, 2300 East, which now will be kind of in those areas superseded with the form-based code. But then also the gravel pit and the old mill area. And those were identified as kind of unique, especially the gravel pit is a unique development site when compared to anywhere else in the city. So what the Plan Development District Ordinance does is it allows a developer a lot more flexibility in making a development application in terms of the uses allowed, in terms of densities, in terms of building heights, in terms of massing and parking requirements and things like that. It's a very flexible ordinance that establishes, basically, it creates a box. It says buildings can't go above this, setbacks have to be at least this. There are parameters, but anything inside those parameters that they can propose. What comes out of that process is not only a development site plan approval, but it's also an actual zoning designation. It's a property specific zoning designation that has a site plan, a master site plan tied to it. That also means it's a legislative process. So what this does is it allows more flexibility to design a proposed development that works for whatever site it's being applied for. But the trade-off is that it's a legislative process. The city and the city council are much more involved in it, in making sure that it really does meet the intent of the ordinance and is good for the area that is being proposed in. The two we've seen used in the past, one is the Walsh property development that's now you can see being constructed back tucked in off of 1300 East. You can see it really only as you're getting on the interstate down in the Union Park area. That was a multifamily project with some live work spaces in it and some affordable housing units that was approved back there. That was the first one we ever did. And then the northern gravel pit, the Rockworth development 20-acre piece, also used that Plan Development District ordinance tool. So it's a much more involved process. The Planning Commission takes public comment and makes a recommendation to the council, who then does the same thing. Typically, the entitlement process, the review timeline is much longer. The city is much more engaged in the process from a zoning and a site plan level, kind of all at once. So it's very front loaded. It's very technical. The plans are big and detailed and they take a while to work through. The idea is it allows for creative development that makes a lot more sense potentially for wherever they're proposed than we would get by using conventional zoning, where we have, maximum heights and minimum setbacks, but anything within that, we don't have as much control over.
But we will roll up our sleeves. I mean, the stuff, the amount of time we spent with this body, with the northern gravel pit, was over a period of years.
Yeah, it was probably about 2 years from beginning to end. Mm-hmm.
And back and forth and, presentations from the developer and, asking questions and getting the answer to those questions and pivots. And it's the intent is to try to be collaborative, but trying to think in the best interests of the city and how it's going to affect adjacent properties. And, it's definitely a unique space. So,
I will make the distinction, maybe you already did this while I was getting water. PDD is different than PUD. We have both in the code, and so you will hear both terms. They are not interchangeable. PUD is Planned Development District. PUD is Planned Unit Development, so just keep that in your mind. You don't really need to know the ins and outs of each until the applications come before you, but there are in fact two different things that almost sound identical, so
Is there minimum acreage for those as well?
for PDDs.
Yeah.
There is, and so there's different tiers of plan development district based on where you are in the city. There's tier one and, which is the gravel pit only. Tier two is the, the old mill area and the major intersection nodes. And then we had a tier three. I think we actually removed tier three because that was the little properties on Fort Union between major intersections. That didn't function as we intended. So I think we pulled tier three out. So there's tier one and tier two. The box that you have to work within is different in both tiers. But yes, there is a minimum acreage in both of those.
And there's a minimum acreage for PUDs, so that doesn't make it any clearer. Well, you guys, we've a couple minutes too. I'm sure you don't mind having a few minutes to kind of commute over, but are there any other questions?
are we good, everyone?
Yep, no, this is great updates. Thank you.
We have a motion?
Motion to adjourn?
Adjourn.
So,
All those in favor of adjourn, please say aye.
Aye.
I.
Please stand.
I
We will reconvene in a few